Hey folks, I am Kevin Iole of Yahoo Sports, and welcome to our latest project, the MMA Odd Couple. I appreciate you joining us, and my co-host is, as I say, the former undefeated fighter and now the rising star on the UFC broadcast on ESPN, none other than Laura Sanko. Laura, I think this is going to be a lot of fun to do, and thank you so much for joining me on this.
Man, Kevin, I am really, really excited about this. I was surprised and honored when you kind of floated this idea to me, but I immediately thought, man, it's unexpected, first of all, to the two of us linking up. And then second of all, I think it's absolutely perfect in its unexpectedness. So I'm excited to see what we can do here.
Awesome. No, I think so too. You know, I want to tell people just how I came this idea. I interviewed you about James Krause. I was writing a story about your teammate James Krause, and you were actually in Abu Dhabi. I was in Las Vegas, and I wrote you a text message and said, "Hey, I'm doing a story on Krause. Can you give me a comment?" And I figured, oh, you know, it's going to be some generic. James is a great guy, and it was like this detailed, insightful, really well thought out thing, like in seconds. And so I thought, this woman knows what she's doing, and she is really good. And so I thought we need to show off your talent. So that was kind of where the genesis of this thing
I
came.
appreciate that. I have a funny behind the scenes story about that too. I was actually in the bathtub when you texted me. I was watching. There's not a lot to do in Abu Dhabi, and so I was watching Netflix on my phone on this little table next to the bathtub when I saw your text come through. So it was. I'd love to take credit for just really carving out a lot of time out of my day, but in Abu Dhabi in the bathtub, I had a lot of thoughts, Kevin.
So it worked great. So for
Yeah.
everybody, so hopefully we can keep this going and it becomes a popular podcast. Let's start. You know, I want to open up just kind of going over some of the news and what's going on. And of course, I think the big news was UFC 255 on Saturday. Both champions, Davison Figueiredo and Valentina Shevchenko, retained their championships. You know, I'll get your thought first of all. Let's talk about Valentina. She beats Jennifer Maia by decision, and I see a lot of people on Twitter are a little bit disappointed in her winning a decision. I think she's gotten to that point in her career where she is so good that if
Yeah.
she doesn't completely crush somebody, it's a disappointment.
It's almost an unfair expectation in reality because after all we're dealing with human beings. We're dealing with flesh and blood here, and I will probably say this more than once throughout the tenure of our podcast, but I have believed for a long time that there is a certain amount of parity in women's MMA that's maybe a little bit different than what you see in the men's side of things. And that's not to say that Valentina Shevchenko is not clearly a level above really the rest of that division. But last night is exactly my point. You know, people that the odds makers, you know, believe to be a sitting duck. I mean, those odds, I don't even remember what it ended up being,
It
but they
closed at
were
18-1.
that's that's ludicrous. It's ludicrous for this sport in which anything can happen. And it's definitely ludicrous for women's MMA, where I'm telling you, there's just the gap between the truly superlative and the really good is not as big as we sometimes think it is in our head. And that's not to take anything away from the greatness of Valentina. I think she did what she was supposed to do out there. But Jennifer Maia she's scrappy. She's a former Invicta champion, and man, it was the second round, right? That I think
Yeah, she took her down in the second.
opened a lot of people's eyes to the caliber of fighter that Jennifer Maia is, and again, just reminded us that Valentina is in fact a human being.
Yeah, and, you know, the thing is, when she got her down, I was like, uh-oh, because this is not just another fighter that took her down. This is a
Yeah.
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt that has her on the ground. And, you know, Valentina said at the post-fight news conference that she felt safe the entire time, so she didn't feel an urgency to try to get her up. But, I mean, I think Valentina is so well-rounded that even against a black belt, she can compete on the ground.
Absolutely. She was in control of the entire fight. I mean, this is certainly not me sitting here saying it was a close fight. It was not a close fight.
Right.
It was a competitive fight, and there's kind of a difference there.
Of course.
You had the sense even into those later rounds that Jennifer Maia was always in the fight and always had a chance to potentially come back and get a submission or maybe even a knockout. I mean, that woman hits very hard. But I'm sure Valentina is extremely confident in her skills, and she has every single reason to be. I was a little surprised that Valentina was pushing the takedowns so much.
So was I.
Yeah,
Why do you think that was? What do you think she was trying?
you know, It's hard for me to tap into that mindset because I really expected this to largely be a striking affair. I did not envision Valentina looking to take it to the ground. I wonder if it's not her looking to show her well-roundedness a little bit. I wonder if it's not her having respect for the striking that Jennifer Maia brings. She's got that traditional Brazilian shoot box style where she hits hard. I mean, she's
Yeah.
landing everything with evil intentions.
And she's a thick girl with big legs,
Yeah.
so when she's turning into those punches, yeah, she's got some heat on them. So
Yeah.
there was no doubt. What did you think of Davison Figueiredo? I wrote a column after the fight, and I said, the flyweights maybe are back for the first time.
Yes.
It was a good night for the flyweights. Brandon Moreno beat Brandon Royval, who I think is awesome, but last night didn't go his way. But what was your thought on Figueiredo? I thought Alex Perez actually fought pretty good for the 2 minutes the fight happened, and I don't think he made a mistake. I think the finish was really just a spectacular move by Davison Figueiredo.
Agree. It speaks to the finishing ability of Davison Figueiredo, and Davison Figueiredo is exactly what this division needed, a finisher. That's always the critique of the flyweights, like, oh, they're fun to watch, they set a pace, but they never finish fights. Well, he just tied Demetrius Johnson for the most finishes in the flyweight division in UFC history, and I think he's got 10 UFC fights, and I can't rattle off the top of my head how many Demetrius had, but I know it was more than 10.
I think he had 7 finishes, I think, Demetrius, in his title fight. So
they and Davison tied that last night in terms of just the number of finishes at flyweight. So to have a guy like that sitting at the top, who not only can push a pace, do everything that you expect a flyweight to do, but then on top of that hits like an absolute truck and can get the submissions, that makes that whole division very exciting all over again. And I agree with you that I don't think Alex necessarily made a mistake. He looked great, and Alex is a solid wrestler. I'm sure he's been put in a guillotine a gazillion times. And I was right there with Joe Rogan. There was a point at which I thought, oh, he's going to pop his head out, where you could start to see the crown of his head coming out a little bit. And then it's almost like when he postured up, Davison was able to crank it in
just a little,
and adjust a little bit even further. But man, that speaks to the squeeze that Davison had. It was fun to see.
Yeah, I thought he might pop out and then do some ground and pound there. So I thought, hey, this could turn around really quickly and be Alex Perez in an advantageous situation. But, really a great performance by him. Now he's going to come back on at UFC 256. Waleed Ismail said last night that was the date they wanted to go. The manager of Davison Figueiredo, Dana had said either the 12th or the 19th of December. Ismail said he wanted to do it on December 12th. So we'll see Moreno. Moreno beats Royval. I actually picked that fight to be the fight of the night before the night, and I had picked Royval to win that fight. No disrespect to Moreno. I just kind of thought Royval was, on a guy on the rise, and he might have still won that fight had it gone on, but the finish was really kind of disappointing because his shoulder pops out.
Exactly. I wanted to see so much more of that fight. Moreno, and I keep wanting to say Brandon, but they're both named Brandon. Moreno was the tides were turning in his favor as that fight was unfolding. But again, it's a fight where Royval is a live candidate in that fight every single second that it's going on. And I went back and watched because I was trying to figure out exactly when that happened. There was no big action that caused his shoulder to come out, but you can see him exclaim before he went belly down. I want to say Moreno pulled his arm a little bit as he was flipping him. And I honestly think it was just that small action that caused it to come out. I don't know if that's something that he's dealt with in the past, but it might be, considering how easily Mark Montoya just sort of glided over, twisted his wrist and, gave him a hug like, okay, you're good to go now. Really unfortunate finish because I wanted to see more of that fight. And I'm with you. I had Royval by a slight edge in my head going into that fight, but man, Figueiredo versus Moreno, bring it.
I thought that fight going in was a 50-50 fight, and you had Royval at plus 160. So I thought the odds were in the favors. It was worth playing. I don't regret the bet, even though, and I don't actually bet, these are my picks.
I was gonna say, I didn't know you were a gambling man, Kevin.
They make me make picks, so I have to pay attention to this. And you know what's funny? I had been on a roll up until last week, and then last week I was 0-6, which is really hard to do. And then I didn't figure it out last night, but I think I was like 2-4 last night. So all of a sudden, my 71% winning percentage is going down.
That happens.
Let's get a couple quick hits here. You know, I want to get your thought, Laura, on who helped themselves the most last night. I thought that Joaquin Buckley, you know, coming off that great back kick, spinning back kick knockout of Himpa Kasangane, I didn't know if it's possible to open more eyes and get more hype, but that win he had over Jordan Wright last night, wow, that was amazing. Quickly, what were do you agree with that, or was there somebody else you thought really?
No, I completely agree with that. I searched for someone that I thought might be more, and no, it's definitely Joaquin was the person who upped his stock even more. It's hard to live up to the hype when you do something like what he did on Fight Island. So there's a lot of pressure dealing with sort of one of those. It reminds me of Johnny Walker, right? Like, you know, can lightning strike twice? Oh gosh, yes, it did. Can it strike a third time? You know, he's going to have pressure on him for a while moving forward. As he continues to face higher and higher caliber competition. I thought he looked great. I thought he looked excellent. It was a difficult, tricky thing for me, because as you brought up early in this podcast, man, you know, James Krause is a very good friend of mine, longtime coach of mine.
We're going to get some thoughts from you on that one when that happens, if it happens.
Yes, I would like to see it happen. It's kind of a trickier matchup because James is not a middleweight. I mean, I never do this, but when people are critical of my teammates, I turn into a Twitter/Instagram comment warrior, and I have to stop myself because I will say this first before we have this discussion. That's a fight I could potentially be covering, you know, as a reporter. And I will promise on my son that if he were to beat James and if I were to interview him, I would never disrespect a fighter by asking questions in a certain way or being, you know, unpleasant to him or any of that. Like I'm able to, in that particular moment, sort of silo that off and not let that affect how I conduct an interview.
Plus, he's a little bigger than you are.
Yeah. Now, me leading up and me on the internet, you know, that's my guy. So like,
so just ignore that, Laura.
Yeah, exactly. Once I'm holding that microphone and I'm 100% professional, I will give him a great interview if he wins. And there's even a part of me, because I've had to do that before with other teammates. There's even a part of me that is happy no matter who it is. I'm happy for someone when they win an important fight.
You know what guys go through to get, you know, to that level.
Yes.
Now we talked about who helped themselves. You know, I was really disappointed at UFC 255 by Cynthia Calvillo. You know, that was a fight that I thought she would win. She was a favorite over a big favorite. I was surprised at how big of a favorite she was over Katlyn Chookagian. You know, I thought Chookagian deserved to be the favorite in that fight. But having said that, you know, it just looked like a size differential. But Cynthia didn't seem to me that she had the fire. I don't know what you thought.
Agree. I think, and I attribute that to her not having settled into a camp yet. She's been getting great work out at Extreme Couture. She was at AKA before that, but then she was at, Team Alpha Male. And it is really difficult to perform at this caliber that she finds herself in if you don't have a consistency in your training. And I think that she's a good fit at Extreme Couture, but you have to make sure that the gym you're at is the perfect fit, right? Like, do you have the exact right training partners? It's not always about the coach. Right. It is very much about the coach, but it has to be the perfect recipe of culture, coach, and training partners.
Well, what is a coach, like 60% and 50%? What would you say the coach is?
Oh man. Oh, if we're making a pie chart, Kevin, I would say, yes, I would say the coach is easily 60%. I think it's the predominant factor, but if you hate the culture you're in, which I don't think she does, I'm not saying that this is true to Cynthia's current situation. If for instance, you don't like the culture, and that's going to affect your day-to-day training. You're not going to want to be there. You're not going to have the right attitude. It has to be this good mix of culture, coaching, and partners. And I just don't know that she's settled yet. Extreme Couture could very well be the perfect place for her. I just don't think she's had enough time to really build a family there and get the reps that she needs and the eyeballs that she needs. And I just felt like she was hesitating and questioning everything she was doing.
Lastly, Shogun, who taps to strikes, and that's something that a lot of people said I thought I would never say to Paul Craig. Good for Paul Craig, good performance by him. You had to be shocked, to see that happen. And now he's into double figures in losses in the UFC. Do you think it's time for him to say goodbye?
I do. I hate even saying that loud because I often feel like I don't have the right to utter those words on someone else's behalf. But since this is an opinion-based show, you're asking my opinion. That is my opinion. He's one of the first fighters I watched when I discovered MMA back in Pride. And it was funny because as we were watching last night, my husband goes, "Isn't he like, God, he's got to be like 45 years old." I said, no, because he started fighting when he was like young. 18. So he has a great deal of mileage, in his fight career, a great deal of mileage, and he's still an excellent fighter. But I don't want to, and I feel like we've kind of turned the corner, and I don't want to see the rest of this. I don't want to have that in my head. And to be honest with you, I tweeted it out. That was the only thing I could think was, oh my God, Shogun just tapped to strikes. And I almost chided myself for saying it like that because it's so dumb. Like, why do we have to have this machismo attitude toward tapping to strikes being like a pussy move, right? He's the caliber of a fighter who should be above us thinking of that of him. But in this culture, you can't help but have those thoughts cross.
Well, and anyone who makes it to this level, the UFC, Bellator, that level, you get to that level and you have to be regarded as, as a tough guy, tough gal. And so you don't, there's no, that other stuff is just internet keyboard warriors that are saying that.
Yeah.
Let's just follow up on that quickly. One of his peers, Anderson Silva, the great Anderson Silva, released by the UFC, but he kind of made some comments like he was trying to be forced to be retired, and so it sounds like he's going to fight again. I find that incredibly sad. He's, it's like one thing if you want to fight and but he's getting knocked out and his chin isn't the same. And to me, that is always the danger. If you're losing and you could lose 20 in a row, but you're just losing on points and you're not getting wet, but he is taking some shots as Shogun is. To me, it's time for Anderson to walk away. And I hope somebody who has his best interest at heart can tell him that.
I agree. I don't like seeing, I think MMA is a young enough sport where, and I do think this will be an interesting discussion to have at some point, Kevin, is the safety versus MMA versus boxing, what we have there. And I'd have to do some research to back up my personal thoughts, but
I've researched it a lot, so that'll be a good one.
That will be a good one. I think that MMA is such a young sport. We have yet to see a generation where just now the Anderson Silvas, the Huas, those guys are just now truly becoming retired. And I would say in probably 5 to 10 years, if we start to see some real effects that the sport has had on them, it has to change how you view when someone chooses to retire and when not even someone chooses to retire, because this fight game is such a drug. Like, it's the hardest drug to give up in the world. Not that I've done a lot of drugs or any drugs, but I imagine it's the hardest drug to give up. We see that time and time again. And I don't want to see Anderson Silva slurring his words, I guess is what I'm taking forever to say. I don't want to see that of anybody in this sport.
Well, and I say this on a lot of interviews I do. I have been ringside for 7 fighter deaths. I've been sitting there. One of them in boxing fell through the ropes on me. I was at ringside. It's a horrific experience. And I know it can happen because I have personally seen it.
Yeah.
And I've covered other ones. And thankfully, I've never seen an MMA fight where that happens. And I don't want to ever see that again. And so when I talk about retiring and walking away, it's because I want to see you enjoy your family, love your life, and not have that be an outcome or serious brain damage. And I think, that when you're going these things, you're treading very close to that line, and all it takes is one. And we know, hey, even the best fighters, that could happen.
Yeah.
You go into the cage, you go into the ring knowing that you accept that risk. But when your reflexes are slowed down and you're not as good as you once were, but you're still fighting that high caliber of opponent, that's what happens.
Yeah. And just like with Rua and his toughness, his viciousness, the part of the magic of watching Anderson Silva fight was how slick he was, how he would taunt people and dance around and almost make them look stupid. And when you take that out of his game, we didn't see that when he fought Uriah Hall. It also makes, even if they had gone to decision, if he had lost a decision, it takes away from like the magic of watching Anderson Silva fight, right? And when that magic is gone, it's like, why are we still doing this?
Exactly, no doubt. A couple quick things. Conor McGregor-Dustin Poirier, long rumor, long talked about, finally official January 23rd in Abu Dhabi, possibly.
I felt like it was announced like 9 times every week.
Now it's official in Abu Dhabi, possibly with fans. Yeah. So we will see. Quick early thought on that. Just like 30 seconds on that one.
Wow. I love that fight. What I like the most about this fight is that this is a legitimate path to a legitimate title. This is not Conor. I want the Conor Jorge fight, as a fan, but that's not a title path. I want the Conor Nate fight again, but that's not a title path. This is a title path to fight Dustin Poirier. And if he gets past Dustin, you start to take away Conor just picks and chooses and he's really not that great. Conor is great, but he has picked and choosed. Right. So now we can maybe put that to bed if he can get past Dustin. But man, I was like reviewing who Dustin has fought in the last 5 years.
Everybody.
I can't wait for this one. It's gonna be crazy.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. Another fight that was named or announced, kind of a shocker, Tony Ferguson and Charles Oliveira. So it's kind of a bizarre fight that we were looking at. Was going to be Michael Chandler. Dana said that Chandler couldn't make the return after cutting weight in late October. So there we are with Charles Oliveira. Is that a good fight for Tony, do you think?
I don't mind it. I
like upside that for Charles. I'm not sure is the upside there for Tony.
Yes, agree. This is a tricky one for Tony because Charles, I think, is just getting to the point where he's going to break through into the greater consciousness as a great fighter in that weight class. I mean, he's finally getting knockouts, and then he went ahead and reminded us about his submission game last time out. We've known about that forever, but he does have power in his hands. His striking has really progressed. So he's got this really dangerous skill set, but he doesn't have the ranking and the aura and the championship caliber that we would have gotten otherwise. So yeah, it's a dangerous fight for Tony to be taking. And I will say this, after watching Tony and Justin Gaethje, I don't want to say this prematurely, but the thought exists in my head that I don't know if we're ever going to see Tony be the same again.
I wrote that at the time. Yeah.
Did you? Yeah.
When you take a beating like he took in that fight, sometimes that stays with you forever. And so that's, hopefully it does not, but
exactly.
That's something to watch out for. And finally in this segment, let's wrap on this, one of the great guys, not just in MMA, in all the sports. He's an NFL or wasn't an official, college football official, high school official, of course, and he's made his mark in both boxing and MMA, member of the International Boxing Hall of Fame, now a member of the UFC Hall of Fame. Of course, I'm talking about Marc Ratner. I have known Marc 30 plus years, one of the great guys, so honored to see him get into the Hall of Fame. Any thoughts on Marc's induction?
Man, I was so touched to see that. And as soon as I saw, I was glad that you were the first face to pop up when they were rolling out who would speak to his accolades and just the impact that he has had, not just on the UFC, but on the entire sport of MMA. Of course, boxing is a whole nother discussion, but we're talking MMA here. He's had such a massive impact on the sport, and he's such an understated individual. I've had people in the past say, who's that sort of like older distinguished gentleman who sort of saunters around the octagon very slowly and elegantly, and in some ways he kind of doesn't really fit the mold for the MMA type,
right? But
man, he's an OG and one of the nicest human beings I've ever met. Has been nothing but just absolutely so kind and so sweet to me. He got up in the middle of a contender series one time, walked back to my position, and he just kind of leaned over and he said, "Young lady, I really appreciate what you have to say. You've got some real thoughts." And I was
Isn't that
just like,
amazing? Yeah, that's
I was
Mark.
so touched. I want to hear a story though. I mean, you've known
Well,
him forever.
well, the only story that I'll tell you was just the video that came up with me, was kind of, I cringed when I saw it. I'll just tell this. I was wearing a golf shirt that had a golf course fairly prominently right here. So I go up now. Number one, I was supposed to do my interview at UFC for that later in the day. And I was going to get a haircut and then go over. So I get a call. Hey, somebody else ended early. Can you come in now? So I get up there. I don't get my haircut. So that's number one. Then as they're sitting there, the producer says, "You know what? The logo, we can't have that on the camera. Can you put a different shirt on?" I go, "I don't have a different shirt. I'm not at home."
They taped it.
So they give me a t-shirt that's 2 sizes too small. It's a UFC t-shirt. I go, "Well, I cannot wear a UFC t-shirt on the air because I'm not employed by the UFC. I'm a journalist. I can't do it." So I switched the shirt inside out. I pull it on. My hair is all messed up over there. And now the first thing I'm talking about is, this thing that's going to be on. So it was like, it was crazy for me. But, I guess the thing I'll remember about Marc, Laura, is how can you not remember this? His calm in the middle of the Tyson Holyfield bite fight. Just a crazy situation. There could have been a riot in the audience.
Yes.
And Marc really handled that well. I was there also on the night of the Fan Man incident when a paraglider came in, crashed into the ring while Riddick Bowe and Evander Holyfield were fighting for the heavyweight title. And in the middle of the 7th round, the fight's hot and heavy, and this guy comes flying into the ring. And on that particular night, he almost crashed into Louis Farrakhan, who was sitting in the first row. And so Farrakhan security people thought it was an impersonal attack on him. And so they came over, and Marc actually in both cases really did great to keep calm and keep the place in order. He just kept it down. And so he's just a wonderful human being. And the first question I asked Dana at the press conference is, "What took you so long?" Right?
Yeah.
Like, how did he not get in before? Because such a great guy.
That's cool. And by the way, as you discussed all this, I came up with a new segment.
Yes.
Story time with Kevin Iole. We're gonna include that moving forward, because this is part of what I was so excited about in terms of partnering with you. Is you have a history that is not matched in these two intertwined sports, and we need more stories like this.
Yeah, I love it. And the funny thing now, I'm going to be covering Mike Tyson soon. I was talking to Mike before, and what is he talking to me about? He's not talking to me about, he's talking to me about MMA. Mike Tyson loves MMA.
That's cool.
And he would have been an MMA fighter. One of our segments we're going to do, Laura, let's get into that now. Each week, folks, Laura and I are going to kind of look at a historical segment, something that happened in history, and kind of spin it forward. What impact does it have on modern MMA? It could have been a fight and, how that changed history. It could have been rule changes. And I think one of the things that's appropriate for this one, since Laura was a fighter and women were on the card in such a big way last night, was let's talk about women in MMA, and especially because November of 2015, only 5 short years ago, Ronda Rousey gets upset by Holly Holm. Now, we know how big Ronda Rousey was at the time, because at that point, Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump tweets about her and says he was glad she lost her fight. So that you've made it pretty big when Donald Trump is bothering to tweet about you. Let's get into women in MMA and Ronda in specific. And so let's first talk, I know MMA went on a long time before Ronda Rousey showed up. But to some people, that was the start of MMA when Ronda came into the UFC. As a woman who fought professionally, what did it mean to you when you saw the UFC finally have women fighters and what Ronda Rousey was doing?
It meant literally everything. And it's hard to sort of overstate that. Not that Ronda was some perfect person who needs to be turned into some godlike figure, but it is impossible to overstate the impact that she had on women's MMA, because she was the tipping point. It doesn't take away from the mountain of people, the mountain of women I could sit here and talk about, the Megumi Fujis, I'm going to not list the right people, but there were lots of people that paved the way for her. But
Shayna Baszler.
Yes, thank you. We could talk forever about the OGs. But she was the tipping point. And here's what I will tell you. Up until women were in the UFC, MMA was always going to be, in large degree, not for everybody, in a very large degree, a really difficult, really intense, really expensive hobby. And that's what it was. That's what it was for me when I was fighting. Didn't fight because I thought I could become rich and I thought could become a superstar. I fought because I loved it and I
Yeah.
loved the feeling that it gave me and I loved the training, but I had no, thoughts of like, oh, this is going to become a career of mine, because that was not an option other than an occasional strike force fight here and there. But even then you can argue like that's not a career, right? Misha Tate was not making enough money in strike force to retire on. She had a good job, but she had other things going on in her life. So Ronda literally made this a career possibility. She created an entire career for women in sports. And you can never take that away from her.
She was a terrific fighter for her time. But I think the thing that made her so popular, it was a combination of things. I mean, all her her endings were so quick. She was
Yes.
doing it. She became this kind of phenomenon. But I think it was like Mike Tyson. There was other fighters who had knockouts or finishes and didn't, become like Ronda became. But I think, she was almost like, she had the trash talk of a man, right? She was so good on the mic, right? And so she promoted the fight so well that way. And especially at that time, I think the audience is now significantly more women than it was at the time. But when Ronda came into MMA, here she is as this young trash talker who's an Olympic medalist. There's so many things about her, but I think she got people's attention. And Joe Rogan did her a favor, even though it was crazy when he's saying, I think she could beat Floyd Mayweather, because that's giving her credibility of, saying, hey,
I think he regrets saying that.
I think he probably does. But one of the greatest fighters of all time, and he's putting her in that league. And Joe was so well respected and not known for that kind of crazy hyperbole when it came to fight talk.
Mm-hmm.
I think, but her trash talk, I think, had a huge part. But now, she goes and she fights Holly Holm as a close to 20-1 favorite at one point, gets utterly destroyed. And I made a case the day before the fight. I was on a radio show hosted by a former NBA player, Tom Tolbert, and he said, does Holly Holm have any chance? And I made a case for her to win. I said, I'm not picking her to win, but if she wins, Ronda's striking is not good. Here's what, has to happen. Mm-hmm. And then it turned out that's what, what she did. But it was still a stunner. And then the Amanda Nunes fight. How do you get from winning fights in 14 and 17 seconds to then getting utterly destroyed the way she did?
For me, it's a combination of things, but I think the biggest thing in my mind is that she got to a point where she was surrounded by people, and I think herself bought into a little bit of what you just said, the hype that her striking was elite level as well as her grappling. I mean, zero arguing that she was the best grappler in that division, period, right. Hands down, end of story. But when people started to make her into this well-rounded fighter, which she simply wasn't, I think she kind of wanted to start to she's a very competitive individual. So once you everybody knows I can armbar. What else can I do? Right. I need to start knocking people out. She was competing with herself in many ways. I think that is a huge factor. I think the demands on her schedule cannot be understated. I don't think any of us has any concept of how many different directions that she was pulled in all the time, not just fight week, all the time.
And she did that to herself, though. That was her own doing, where she decided to, and I don't blame her for it, right? I say, God bless you. You took advantage of it and you made yourself wealthy and a great career. But, she made that choice to do movies and write books and all that other stuff. That
thought, oh no, I can do it all. I can be a movie star. I can write books. I can do all these things. And by the way, I can strike and I can, do clinch work and, I can wrestle. And I think when women's MMA in particular, you are at such a massive advantage when you're a specialist. It is a different thing than men's MMA. You have very well-rounded fighters, Valentina Shevchenko, who cap that, who can do it all. But you can still get very, very far in women's MMA being a specialist these days. So it was really, it was kind of sad to see her try to go out there and strike when you'd see tape of her hitting mitts and just be like, oh, I don't think that's a great idea. You have this incredible gift, use it, continue to use it.
I gave her credit for the Holly Holm fight, because I said, you know what, she got beat up, but she kept fighting. She stayed in there. There was no quit in her, you know, until she got knocked down and knocked out. You know, she was in there trying to win the fight. And that's what we want out of our, you know, our athletes, is we want them to try to compete to win. And she did that. Now, again, you know, I thought her reaction to the loss was horrendous, and she blamed the media. You know, she largely has not spoken to the media. I mean, a couple cases here and there, but she largely has not spoken to the media once since then. And I think she got such favorable coverage from the media, you know, not just myself, but from, you know, all of my peers, that I think it's a disservice and a disgrace, really, the way she handled that. Do you think that her reaction, she's probably going to lose to Amanda Nunes anyways, but do you think that it made it even worse? Like, because she put herself in this zone where I think, you know, there were so many thoughts in her head that she just looked like she had no confidence whatsoever when she walked into the cage that night at UFC 207.
Yeah, it's a fascinating, interesting game of psychology there, right? You have to have this incredible self-belief, but again, I think it's when you start to surround yourself with people who are not keeping you in check, I guess.
Right.
And yeah, I think that the way that she handled the Amanda loss and the Holly loss, to be honest with you, afterwards, not in the fight, but afterwards, was just it was unfavorable, to say the least. You know, I remember when Connor lost to Nate, and it would have been so easy for him. He had the power to run and hide and not do media and blame it on things, or say I was, you know, whatever. But I will always appreciate the fact that he was so self-reflective and able to talk about it honestly after the fight. And that, to me, is the mark of a real
Yeah.
champion. I don't hate, I don't want to hate on Ronda for the way that she
No.
handled it, but it's not, I definitely don't think it's the preferred way of handling things. And I do think it affected how people thought of her for a minute there.
Yeah, you know, Dave Schaller was the UFC PR director at the time. He's now with the Philadelphia 76ers. And he told me that night, he said, you know, Connor told him, I'm not coming to the press conference. I don't want to talk. And Dave said, he said to him, you know, Connor, you're there when you win. You ought to be there when you lose and stand up. And he said, Connor said, you're right, and I'll come. And then Connor showed up, and, you know, full marks to Connor for that. And I think, you know, part of MMA is, you know, is this whole thing built into martial arts is respect and honor. And I
Yeah.
think, you know, she never congratulated Holly on the win, right? Even when she was on Saturday Night Live and hosting
Yeah.
Saturday Night Live, which was this huge thing, she didn't congratulate Holly on one of the greatest upsets in sports history. And to me, that, you know, kind of was a bad thing, and it turned people against her. But I think she, in her own mind, was also making up, you know, like, you know, I never ripped her. Like, I after the fight, I said, hey, you know, she got beat, but Holly Holm, you know, was a great boxer and beat her, and Ronda was a warrior and kept going. But I think she kind of looked like the world's against me, and her confidence just totally shrank. And if you're going to fight Amanda Nunes and you have no confidence in your ability, look out, you are in trouble.
Yeah. Oh, Amanda has that that Tyson-esque, that cyborg-esque effect on people, where you can very easily beat yourself before you get into the octagon with them. And yeah, you're right. To fight Amanda, you have to have a balanced mindset. And I have always, maybe it's a personal preference, but I have always really appreciated the fighters who are gracious in losing, and who are
Right.
even even take it to the point of being self-deprecating, or, you know, there's so much of it. When you're a fighter, this is your life, but there's so much of life outside of fighting, right? There's life and death, there's love and family, and all of these ideas that are beyond the entertainment that we get from this amazing sport. And when your attitude about losing affects your life beyond the size and scope of MMA, I think that's when you have a problem.
I'm going to use, we'll wrap this part up on this. I'm going to use you and I as an example, right? We're minor public figures. We're in the media. People see us, and they think they know us, and they think they know what we're doing. And, you know, I'll get accused of, oh, you're on the take, or you're doing this, right? And, you know,
Yeah.
not even close to being true. And I know what the truth of what's going on is. And so I can only imagine what it's like for a star of the level that Ronda was at that time, because she wasn't just an MMA star. She was after beating Betch Kohea, I think she moved into that mainstream A-level star, where everybody wanted a piece of her. And I think, sometimes we try to analyze and, we try to be amateur psychologists with these people. And we looked into their mind, and we don't really know what's going on in her life. But all I know is this, had she handled the loss to Holly better, I think things would have come out differently for her in the future. Not saying that she would have beaten Amanda. I don't think she probably would have, but I think her place in the sport and the respect that she got from people would have been a lot different.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Now, so having said that, and I think Ronda is a great, so I don't want to sound like I'm trashing her, but so that's just the truth there. What is the state of women's fighting now? I mean, do you think we're at a point, is women's fighting better than it's ever been?
I do. I think it is. I think that you're always going to have dips and lulls. I think the bantamweight division obviously is not where it was when we had the Miesha Tates and the Ronda Rouseys of the world, but I'm reminded of, I don't know, I'm reminded of the awesomeness of women's MMA on a regular basis. And obviously I work for Invicta as well as the UFC. And the last card that we had, although short because we had some COVID related issues, was just it was a good testament to that, right? I think that people at this point no longer see women's MMA as additive, as we've got this and okay, let's throw this in and make it, a little extra. It's right there. And I think I credit the UFC for presenting the women's side of the sport on the same platform that they present the men's side of the sport, because you just don't see that anywhere else. Right. Perhaps maybe a bit in boxing, but NBA, WNBA,
no,
completely different things.
Not even in boxing. Women in boxing don't get paid nearly as much. They don't get treated with respect. There was a card that was trying to be put together. Clarissa Shields was going to be on it. Amanda Serrano was going to be on it. A lot of the top women, probably all of the top 8 women in the world, except for Katie Taylor. Mm-hmm. And it kind of fell apart for myriad reasons, but a lot of it was that just the money wasn't there, and the ratings aren't there. And here's what I don't understand: in women's boxing, there's a very low finish rate. Now they fight 2-minute rounds, so they don't have that extra 33% of time in a round if you get somebody to hurt to go finish them. But I think the finish rate in women's MMA is significantly higher than it is in women's boxing. Yep. And I don't quite understand why that would be, right? So in women's, if you didn't know women's MMA existed and you look at women's boxing, you say, well, it's a power thing. Women don't have the power, but you go to MMA and that's not true. You see, that they finish. So why do you think it is? And do you think that has anything to do with why it's popular in MMA, women's MMA is popular because we get the finishes there that we don't see necessarily in women's boxing?
I think you make an excellent point. And the obvious addition is submissions, because I think you have a lot of excellent female grapplers. And I know we'll talk about some other divisions, but especially the lighter that you go, you can get some really superlative grapplers who are going to finish well on the ground. But even if you were to take the submissions out of it, right, take that completely out of the equation, I think the smaller gloves and the availability of a TKO versus just a straight up knockout where, maybe your opponent is knocked down and then they have a second to collect themselves and they stand back up. I think just literally the mechanics of MMA, where you can follow up a knockdown and really cap it off and finish with a TKO, allows women the chance, because listen, it's science. Okay. Women, this is crazy. Cause I'm not a feminist, but I'm not a feminist maybe in the traditional sense. And science is science, right? Like women are not as strong as men in general. Okay. There are of course exceptions. Women do not hit as hard as men in general. And so I think that the smaller gloves and just the way that the sport is played, so to speak, allows for that, which makes it more exciting, which makes it more appetizing. And I do think that the UFC does a very nice job of building the story of certain fighters that they think have, potential to rise up as stars. They do a great job of building that backstory and, through the Contender Series, through whatever it is. And people latch on, I think, even more so to the idea of a woman fighter because it's unexpected. No matter how much once you get into MMA, that you realize that there really is no stereotypical type of person who fights MMA, male or female. But the reality is that to the general public, it is unexpected for a woman, and I think Ronda is a good example, for a woman who looks a certain way to go out there and to have these bloody physical exchanges, hitting people, punching people in the face, elbowing people in the face for a living. It's still like, oh, wow. And that oh, wow effect is what draws people in.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So, we're talking the quality is better, but yet we look and we're how many years into the UFC having women fight, and we're struggling to get Amanda opponents. She is going to fight when she gets healthy. Your teammate, Megan Anderson, we don't know when that's going to happen. I'm hearing maybe February now, but still don't know for sure. What do you think? Why are we this far in? I mean, I guess the simple thing is women aren't as big, but it seems like in boxing, there are women of 145 and up where we simply don't have that in MMA in any quantity at all.
I do think that there is and it's such a tricky thing. And I think this of the atomweight division as well. There is a bit of a build it and they will come factor in women's MMA. And one of the best examples of that to me is Amanda Nunes, because I can distinctly remember when Invicta was the tip of the mountain for women's MMA. Amanda is fighting, but she's losing to Sarah DeLelio, who is a great fighter. But when you think about Amanda Nunes losing to Sarah DeLelio on an Invicta stage, and that is the woman who then goes on to become the greatest female fighter of all time, at least as we see her now. What happened there? And to me, what happened there is Ronda and others created a place where she could go, I want to be a star. I want to be at the top. I have a goal now. Like I have my sights set on something and I can dedicate my life to it. I can cut out all this other stuff, because so many women, it's why their records are so spotty. Like so many women were just taking whatever fight came to them early in their career. Right. It creates, I don't know, I'm kind of losing my thought here and I apologize, but it's just a different beast. And until you create a place for someone to strive toward, you're not going to see the groundswell. I think the bigger women go to boxing, the bigger women go play basketball.
Well, so that's a question for you then. Kayla Harrison fought on the Invicta card.
Yeah.
And Kayla, I covered Kayla in the Olympics when she won her second judo gold medal. Unbelievable accomplishment. She is a great athlete. I think, truth be told, she could fight 155 easily. I mean, she fought that in the PFL. She's a big girl. She made 145. Now, you were there in person. You saw how she looked. Could she compete at 145, or do you think she's given up too much physically with the way she's cutting to be as effective as she would be if there were a 55-pound division?
She absolutely could compete at 145. And we talked to her about that. And I didn't realize how personally, just sort of, I guess morally, you might say, she is against cutting weight. She walks at like 160. She said 165 on a fat day. So that to me, that's a featherweight easily. And she did. She made weight with no problem. She's never really had to be very strict on her diet. She feels like cutting too much weight or excessive weight sets a bad example, but it was either that or not fight the rest of the year. So she made the choice, and she looked phenomenal at featherweight. Yeah. She was not sucked out when she weighed in, and she absolutely pounded her way to a bloody dominant victory where she could finally use elbows for the first time in a while, which was cool.
Yeah, it's kind of scary to see Kayla Harrison, as big and strong as she is, dropping elbows on top.
Yes, yes. Yeah, it's the featherweights, unfortunately, are sort of dispersed. If we could somehow monopolize them all and get them all in one spot, we'd have a division, but it's not deep enough to have them, some in Bellator and some in PFL and some in Invicta, and
Now, you mentioned atomweights before. Dana White said at the news conference following UFC 255 that he's mulling it over.
So you're saying there's a chance.
This could be a Laura Sanko comeback. We could see her put that undefeated record on the line in the UFC. But what do you think? Like one of the questions, like one of my beliefs, I'll use Demetrius Johnson. One of the things that I think happened is there's a certain segment of the fan base, they look at Demetrius as a small guy, and he Demetrius is tremendously fit guy, but I think his look, he didn't look like this dangerous guy, right? He didn't have that look. And I think there was a segment of the fan base, oh shit, this guy's small. I'd kick the crap out of him. You and I know that was laughable, and Demetrius would go out and destroy these guys. But I think there was a large number of people in the fan base who would say that. And I wonder now, when you go to atom weights and 105 pounders, if you're going to get men who would take that seriously, right? I know the hardcore MMA fans will, but that's a really small percentage of the overall fan base. Do you think that we can get them on a large scale into the atom weights, just like they're into the bantamweights?
I think that you can. I think that there I've had these discussions many, many times. Mick is probably sick of me bringing it up. In fact, when I brought it up when I was interviewed in Abu Dhabi, like as soon as that interview was posted and he saw it, he immediately texted me. And I thought I had made him angry because he's like, I've been down this rabbit hole. It doesn't work. There's not enough depth, blah, da, 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 da. But we talked about it a little bit. And I brought up what I said about Amanda. There doesn't appear to be depth, because why would women enter this sport if they have no place to go? Right. Other than, and I love Invicta, but even if you can be a superstar in Invicta, it's not a career. It is not a way for you to provide for your family and retire on that money. So build it and they will come was my chant to him. I don't know that they're ready to do that, but I think that the fan base would be there, because I think that the women are very much like the flyweights. You get a lot of grappling finishes. You do get some striking finishes. There's some Loma Lookwoonmee, perfect example. She's one of the most exciting strikers you will ever see, particularly when she fights at atomweight, because she's so physically strong. I saw her teep kick an opponent literally across the octagon in Invicta. Wow. And I think, I hate to bring this in, this could potentially be another interesting whole topic. There's a lot of pretty girls at 105. There's no other way to say it. And I think that can sometimes be a factor to draw people in. It's not what keeps them, because you have to be good at what you do. But it is intriguing, like, oh, this is a cute, pretty woman, and oh, she fights. That doesn't make sense in my head. I want to learn more about this. So I think that on that very basis, and then if they're talking about making waves in Asia and making inroads in those markets, there are a lot of atomweight women in Japan and China.
Interesting. Well, I think it's safe to say the women's division is, the women's game is in good shape and getting better. So hopefully maybe we see the atomweights in, and I will be writing about the next Laura Sanko fight.
Hopefully the window's closing. It's got to happen fast, Kevin.
No, let's just wrap this up. That was a great discussion. Thank you for that. Next week, couple quick things. We have Curtis Blades against Derek Lewis on Saturday. Real quick thoughts on that matchup, how you see that going, and does Derek's striking handle Curtis's grappling?
Curtis has looked phenomenal as of late. And if you're asking me to make a pick, I'll probably am going to side with Curtis a little bit on this one. But Derek Lewis is just one of those guys that will, like, randomly, he constantly looks like he's losing until he wins, right? Or until he just flattens someone early in the fight. But the grappling aspect of it is very interesting to me, because Derek will often, I don't know if he's playing possum or if he's just sort of saving his gas tank, but he's a guy who, when he wants to stand up, he's just going to stand up. Yeah. I don't know that he's faced someone with the grappling caliber of Blades. I'm excited to see that too. In his, exactly.
And he faced Olenek last time, who I would say Olenek is a damn good grappler, but Olenek is not as big, right?
Not as fit, certainly not as physical and as athletic. He's tricky, very tricky, but I'm excited for that one. It has some big implications in that division for sure.
That's going to be something, and the first trip to Fight Island, I thought one of the benefits for the UFC was the fighters that came out of here, Munir Lazzez, Hamzat Chimaev, Rafael Fiziev, Amanda Ribas. Amanda had been, known before, but I thought she really lifted her star to another level on the first trip to Fight Island. Fiziev, to me, with that win over Mark Diakese, kind of said, hey, I'm going to be a important factor here in this sport. He's fighting Renato Moicano in the co-main event next week. I think that's a really sneaky good fight. What is your thoughts on that one?
Is a very sneaky good fight. And I like Renato Moicano at lightweight. I think he looks fantastic. Another guy who, when you go through his record, you think, oh my gosh, this guy has fought everybody good in the last 5 years. So chalk those couple of losses he had to the side, to be honest with you. He is an excellent fighter. Rafael Fiziev, I always get his last name wrong, or Fiziev, I think it's pronounced. Hammers. When I was listening to those leg kicks, I was there on Fight Island. I could hear his kicks in my position in the back. It was like a baseball bat. But Renato Moicano, he's got the striking. He has excellent submission skills. That one, I think, is going to be potential fight of the night.
Now, Dana always teases me recently, because ever since I saw Chimaev fight on Fight Island, I call him all the time. What do you got going? So, he's at several press conferences teased me about, you didn't ask me about Chimaev. They put Chimaev in with Leon Edwards, which I have to admit, I'm a little surprised. Leon Edwards, one of the best fighters in the world. And then Chimaev is favored.
That's crazy.
How is Chimaev favored over Leon Edwards? Tell me this. Explain this to me, Laura.
It's wild. It is absolutely, I'm sorry, but like Leon Edwards is just constantly disrespected, and I don't understand it. It's like these people have not watched his fights. That guy is really good, and he's really good everywhere. And listen, I am on the Khamzat Chimaev train. I was sort of skeptically standing on the scaffolding the first couple of fights. I'm on the train now. I'm not driving the train, but I'm on the train. But listen, the gap between Gerald Meerschaert and Leon Edwards is massive. And so I guess all the questions that I have that maybe you still have about Khamzat, they're going to get answered. But this is, I can't fathom that he's favored. I think
the only way, as the odds aren't necessarily reflective of who the sportsbook think is going to win. It's who they think the money is going to come in on. And I think, Khamzat's more of a quote unquote public figure, and people are going to bet on him because he's been the hot name. But yeah, to me, like if you're looking to make some money, put a bet down on Leon Edwards now before the line changes, because at some point the sharp bettors are going to see that, and they're going to bet on Edwards, and the line's going to change. And I wouldn't be shocked if Leon Edwards went off as the favorite, that and completely switch.
You're going to steal Yanni's job, Kevin. Be careful.
Yeah, that's going to be that'll be something. If Yanni doesn't have to worry after the last 2 weeks. Maybe before last week he would have had to worry a little bit, because there was one stretch I actually was 13-1-1.
Oh wow!
And I was, so now I think I'm now, what is it, 2-10 in my last 12.
Burned that right to the ground.
So shows you blind pick and get an acorn at any point. Anyways, Laura, great job as always. This is our beta test, so to speak. So you did a fantastic job. We are going to tweak this, get it better. Your final thoughts before I wrap this up and let you get back to your family.
I'm just excited. I mean, this smile I have plastered on my face is genuine. I love talking to you. I learn something every single time I do. So that's exciting to me. And I'm such a fan at heart. Like I didn't end up where I am because I went to school for broadcasting or journalism or anything. Like we all know that. You can tell. I'm such a massive fan of this sport. I was a fan before I trained. So like this to me is me having an avenue where I can just sort of geek out with another massive fan of MMA, and I'm excited.
I want to tell you one other story. I think it was the second trip to Fight Island. So I had interviewed you on the first one. And I can't remember. I think it was the second trip. But anyways, that was when they put all those Facebook stats out, how well you were doing on Facebook.
Yeah.
And so one of the UFC PR people called me and said, hey, would you be interested in talking to Laura Sanko, look at all these stats out there, maybe about how this is going? So I said, sure, and I love talking to Laura. So I called you and I did a Zoom. Well, the day that I did that Zoom with you, you don't even know this. Only Chris Costello at UFC knows this. So I had a tape recorder going down, and thank God I did. But it was a fantastic interview, and I forgot to hit the record button on the Zoom. And so I did not record the Zoom, and we had this whole interview that I got done, and I said, oh my God, that was great. And I texted my editor at Yahoo, and I said, you're going to love this. This Laura was fantastic. This is going to be incredible. And then I'm waiting, I'm going, there's no video here. Now I had the audio, so I used it for a couple of my stories. I pulled some of your quotes, but I just felt so bad. I said, I was such a moron. I didn't want to call you back and say, I screwed up.
Oh, you should have. You know who I accidentally did that to the other day. Who did I do that to? Bobby Green. Oh my God, I was mortified.
Yeah.
And it wasn't entirely my fault. My computer just like Zoom crashed or something, but we had this whole great, and he hates doing interviews. And I did this whole thing. I'm like, Bobby, we have to do it again. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, well, in my defense, what happened was I usually use the Mac version of Zoom, and there's a certain way you go to get the recording going. And that particular day I did it with you, I was using my iPad, and I thought it was recording, but it wasn't. And I get done, and I'm like, I go to find the file to send it, and I'm like, oh. So that's a little secret. Don't blame me for that missing.
Confessions. That'll be another segment. Embarrassing confessions.
Exactly.
I have a lot of
great job. I appreciate it. We will be back at some point. Give us your thoughts on this one. We'll be back at some point with the next episode of the MMA Odd Couple. For Laura Sanko, I'm Kevin Iole. Thanks for being with us.